Imagine the ground beneath your feet beginning to shake. Everything that once seemed solid, safe, and stable starts to crack before your eyes. You try to keep your balance, but nothing stays in place. Fear rises, your heart races, and a feeling that something far greater than you is out of your control takes over. Now tell me, what if this earthquake were not just a dream? What if it were a direct warning from your unconscious mind and the spiritual world about something that is about to collapse in your life? Dreaming of an earthquake is never an ordinary dream. It carries deep, intense, and often unavoidable messages. Today you will understand why this dream appears, what it reveals about your mind, your soul, and the silent tremors that have already begun within you. The earthquake is a symbol of inner rupture. Dreaming of an earthquake symbolizes, above all, a deep inner rupture, silent and often ignored in waking life. Psychologically, this dream represents emotional conflicts accumulated over time, unresolved situations, repressed feelings, and postponed decisions that have gone beyond what can be endured. Something within you can no longer be sustained, even if externally everything appears normal. It may be a relationship that has lost its meaning, a limiting belief you have carried since childhood, a job that no longer matches who you have become, or even an idealized image you built about yourself that is now beginning to crumble. The unconscious chooses the earthquake as a symbol because it is unpredictable, intense, and impossible to ignore, just like these inner emotions that, when suppressed for too long, find an abrupt way to surface. From a psychological perspective, this dream indicates that your mind is trying to draw your attention to something that has been swept under the emotional rug. Small discomforts, frustrations, and fears have accumulated until they created unbearable internal pressure. The earthquake appears as a symbolic explosion of this buildup, showing that denial is no longer possible. It is a sign that changes must happen, even if they bring insecurity, fear, or a sense of loss. In this case, the rupture is not a punishment, but an attempt to restore emotional balance. From a spiritual point of view, dreaming of an earthquake carries an even deeper meaning. It represents the breaking of false structures, illusions, and foundations built on fear, emotional dependence, or disconnection from one's true essence. It is as if the universe intervenes directly, forcing a necessary cleansing. Everything that is not aligned with your inner truth begins to shake. The spiritual ground moves so that you realize some certainties were fragile, some promises were empty, and some paths no longer lead to the growth of the soul. The spiritual earthquake does not destroy out of cruelty, but out of the need for realignment. This dream may also indicate a process of awakening. Often the soul only evolves when what is false collapses. The earthquake arises to break old patterns, repetitive cycles of suffering, and behaviors that keep you trapped in an outdated version of yourself. It is a call to abandon rigidity, excessive control, and resistance to change. Nothing shakes without a reason. When this dream appears, it reveals that something must fall so that something true can be born. Inner rupture, although painful, is the first step toward a more conscious, solid reconstruction aligned with who you truly are. Loss of control and fear of the unknown. During an earthquake dream, the most common and striking sensation is fear, an intense, almost paralyzing fear that arises from realizing that nothing can be controlled in that moment. Psychologically, this emotion is directly linked to losing control over important situations in real life. You may be going through phases in which you cannot predict the next steps, feel insecure about the future, or sense that crucial decisions are being made beyond your reach. The unconscious transforms this feeling into images of chaos because the earthquake represents exactly that. When the ground, which symbolizes stability and security, ceases to exist, nothing feels firm, reliable, or predictable. This dream often appears during periods of great emotional instability, sudden changes, or forced transitions. It may be related to fear of losing a job, watching a relationship fall apart, facing financial problems, or even confronting inner truths you have been avoiding. Psychologically, the earthquake reveals an overwhelmed mind trying to deal with uncertainties beyond rational control. The feeling of helplessness in the dream reflects the difficulty of accepting that not everything can be planned, predicted, or resolved through logic. Fear arises because the human mind seeks security, and the earthquake shatters any illusion of absolute control. In the spiritual realm, dreaming of an earthquake in this context indicates resistance to necessary changes. The soul already knows something must be transformed, but the mind insists on clinging to what is familiar, even if it is worn out or harmful. In this case, fear does not come from the earthquake itself, but from the desperate attempt to maintain structures that can no longer be sustained. The spiritual plane uses this symbol to show that excessive attachment to control is also a form of imprisonment. The more you try to hold on to what is destined to change, the greater the suffering becomes. Spiritually, the earthquake teaches that the unknown should not be seen only as a threat, but as a possibility. It arises to break the illusion that security lies in external things, fixed certainties, or paths already taken. When everything shakes, the invitation is to trust more in the flow of life and less in the need to control every detail. The collapse, though frightening, may be the only path to spiritual liberation. Sometimes only when the ground disappears do you learn to walk with greater awareness, faith, and connection to your own essence. Earthquake and deep transformation. Not every earthquake symbolizes pure destruction. In many dreams, it represents the beginning of a profound process of inner reconstruction. Psychologically, dreaming of an earthquake indicates that you are going through an intense phase of personal transformation in which old mental structures can no longer support who you are becoming. Limiting thought patterns, inherited beliefs, self-sabotaging behaviors, and attitudes that once seemed normal begin to collapse, making room for a new way of perceiving yourself and the world. This dream often appears during moments of forced maturation, when life demands difficult decisions, changes in posture, and the abandonment of comfort zones that no longer promote growth. From a psychological standpoint, the earthquake reveals a conflict between the old version of you and the person trying to emerge. There is internal tension between the desire to remain in the familiar and the urgent need to evolve. The unconscious uses the image of the seismic shock to show that transformation can no longer be postponed. What once seemed solid, stable, and safe begins to crumble because it no longer matches your current emotional reality. The fear that arises in the dream is part of the process, as every deep change involves uncertainty. Still, that fear also signals that something new is trying to be born. From a spiritual perspective, the earthquake represents an awakening. It appears as a call from the soul to break away from illusions, masks, and paths followed out of obligation, fear, or others' expectations. It is the moment when the familiar ground breaks, so you can see new possibilities previously hidden by routine, complacency, or lack of awareness. The spiritual earthquake does not appear to destroy your life, but to align your path with your true essence. It indicates that the soul is asking for coherence between who you are inside and the life you live outwardly. This dream also reveals that the emotional instability you feel is not a sign of weakness, but part of the growth process. Spiritually, periods of instability are common before major expansions of consciousness. The earthquake arises to dismantle old structures and prepare the ground for something more authentic and meaningful. Even if the process is uncomfortable, it carries the promise of renewal. Dreaming of an earthquake in this context is a powerful invitation to accept transformation, trust the process, and allow reconstruction to occur in alignment with your inner truth. Dreaming that the earthquake destroys everything around you. When in the dream, the earthquake destroys houses, buildings, streets, or even entire cities, the meaning becomes even deeper and more intense. Psychologically, this scenario is directly linked to the fear of losing everything that has been built throughout life. It is not only about material possessions, but also identity, status, relationships, emotional security, and personal projects. This dream often appears when you feel your foundation is threatened. Financial crises, professional instability, emotional breakups, or drastic changes beyond your control. The unconscious creates the image of total destruction to express extreme vulnerability in the face of losing what once gave meaning and stability to your existence. Psychologically, the surrounding destruction reveals how much you associate who you are with the external structures you have built. Home, work, relationships, social recognition, and future plans become pillars of identity. When the earthquake destroys everything, the unconscious questions this dependence. It shows that placing security solely in external factors makes any threat capable of generating deep fear, anxiety, and emptiness. This dream appears as a warning that your identity may be overly tied to roles, achievements, or expectations that do not reflect your true essence. This type of dream may also indicate fear of failure or absolute loss of control. Psychologically, it can appear in people who are highly demanding of themselves and feel they must keep everything under control to feel safe. Total destruction symbolizes the collapse of this attempt at control, showing that not everything can be guaranteed or preserved forever. The emotional discomfort that accompanies this dream reflects the difficulty of accepting life's impermanence and the constant need for adaptation. In the spiritual realm, dreaming that the earthquake destroys everything around you symbolizes a process of radical detachment. It is a clear message that nothing external defines who you truly are. The spiritual plane uses the image of total destruction to teach that everything that can be lost is not your true essence. When everything falls, what remains is inner truth, what cannot be destroyed by external circumstances. This dream arises when the soul is ready for a deep new beginning, even if the mind still resists out of fear, attachment, or insecurity. Spiritually, complete destruction should not be seen as punishment, but as liberation. It indicates the end of cycles that have fulfilled their purpose and the beginning of a new phase based on authenticity and awareness. The earthquake clears the ground so that a new construction becomes possible, now on truer foundations aligned with the essence of the soul. Even if the dream causes anguish, it carries a powerful message. When everything false collapses, the opportunity arises to rebuild life in a lighter, freer, and truer way. Dreaming that you survive the earthquake. When, in the dream, you survive an earthquake, the message conveyed is extremely powerful and meaningful. Psychologically, this scenario symbolizes emotional resilience, inner strength, and the ability to adapt amid chaos. Even when everything seems to collapse around you, there exists within you a set of inner resources that allow you to endure, reorganize, and move forward. This type of dream often appears after difficult periods such as emotional losses, financial crises, breakups, illnesses, unexpected changes, or phases of great instability. The unconscious unconscious uses survival as a symbol to show that despite the suffering experienced, you were not destroyed by it. From a psychological perspective, surviving the earthquake indicates that you have gone through or are going through experiences that tested your emotional limits. The fear felt during the dream reflects the intensity of these challenges, but remaining alive reveals that your psychic structure is stronger than you imagined. This dream appears as a form of inner recognition, showing that you managed to cross situations that once seemed unbearable. Even if scars remain, the unconscious signals that there was learning, maturation, and personal growth. Survival symbolizes the ability to reinvent yourself after collapse. Spiritually, dreaming that you survive an earthquake represents protection, guidance, and spiritual learning. It is as if the spiritual plane was showing that despite the tremors and necessary ruptures, you are not alone or abandoned. There is a greater force guiding this process of transformation. In this context, the earthquake does not appear as punishment, but as a test of faith, resilience, and alignment with your essence. Surviving the shock indicates that you are being prepared for a new level of consciousness, stronger and more awakened. This dream also carries the message that transformation did not come to destroy who you are, but to strengthen your awareness. What did not fall during the earthquake symbolizes what is true, solid, and essential within you. Spiritually, this reveals that your soul is maturing and learning to trust more in its inner strength than in external structures. Surviving the earthquake is a clear sign that even amid chaos, you are evolving. Finally, this dream expands your view of your own life. It shows that you are capable of facing deep changes, losses, and challenges without losing your essence. Survival symbolizes rebirth, overcoming, and preparation for a new phase. Dreaming that you survive an earthquake is an invitation to recognize your strength, honor your journey, and trust that even when everything shakes, there is within you a foundation that cannot be destroyed. Earthquake during the night or in the dark. When the earthquake happens in the dark or at night, the symbolism becomes even more intense and profound. Psychologically, the absence of light represents the unknown, what has not yet been consciously understood or recognized. This type of dream indicates hidden fears, accumulated anxiety, and insecurities that have not yet been clearly identified by the rational mind. These emotions operate in the shadows of the unconscious, influencing decisions, behaviors, and reactions without you fully realizing their origin. Darkness amplifies the sense of vulnerability, showing that you are dealing with situations in which you cannot see clear paths or immediate solutions. Psychologically, dreaming of an earthquake in the dark reveals a phase of inner confusion. It may indicate difficulty understanding what is happening within you or in your external life. Fear does not come only from the earthquake, but from the inability to predict what comes next. The mind feels disoriented without secure references, generating anguish and insecurity. This dream often appears when you are facing important decisions, existential crises, or deep inner changes, but still lack clarity to act with confidence. The unconscious uses darkness to show that an internal process is underway that has not yet been fully illuminated by awareness. Spiritually, darkness symbolizes a transitional phase known as the dark night of the soul. It is a period in which old beliefs, certainties, and senses of identity begin to dissolve. The earthquake appears in this scenario as a spiritual test, a necessary breaking before illumination. It is the moment when old spiritual structures collapse so that a deeper understanding of existence can emerge. Darkness does not represent punishment, but preparation. It indicates that the soul is undergoing a process of purification and detachment from illusions that no longer serve its growth. This type of dream also reveals inner resistance to the transformation process. The mind fears the unknown and tries to cling to what is familiar, even if it is worn out. The earthquake in the dark shows that it is no longer possible to keep avoiding certain inner truths. Spiritually, it invites surrender and trust in the soul's evolutionary process. Even without clearly seeing the path, the dream suggests that a greater purpose is being fulfilled. Finally, dreaming of an earthquake at night indicates that a new level of consciousness is approaching. Before clarity comes darkness. Before reconstruction comes collapse. This dream shows that old certainties must disappear to make room for a deeper, more authentic understanding, aligned with who you truly are. The night is not the end, but the gateway to a more conscious and transformative awakening. Earthquake and personal relationships. Dreaming of an earthquake may also be deeply connected to personal relationships and emotional bonds. Psychologically, this dream indicates unresolved conflicts, accumulated tensions, and repressed feelings that have been ignored or minimized over time. Unfinished conversations, silent resentments, frustrations, and unmet expectations create inner pressure that eventually must surface. The earthquake appears as a symbol of this emotional collapse, revealing that certain relationships no longer have a solid foundation to remain as they are. Often this dream arises when there is fear of separation, abandonment, or losing someone important, even if it has not yet occurred consciously. From a psychological perspective, the earthquake in relationships symbolizes the collapse of bonds based on emotional dependence. It may indicate relationships in which one party has diminished themselves to maintain the connection, sacrificed identity, or tolerated situations that caused ongoing suffering. The unconscious uses the image of the seismic shock to show that this type of relationship cannot continue without consequences. The fear fear felt in the dream reflects insecurity about the possibility of rupture, but also reveals how necessary that rupture may be to restore emotional balance and self-esteem. This dream may also appear when there is difficulty establishing healthy boundaries. Psychologically, the earthquake represents the breaking of these fragile limits, showing that something must be reviewed in the way you relate to others. It may indicate excessive control, submission, emotional demands, or attachment to relationships that no longer promote mutual growth. The symbolic collapse reveals that maintaining apparent stability may be more harmful than facing change. In the spiritual realm, dreaming of an earthquake related to personal relationships indicates the closing of karmic ties. These are deep connections that served an important purpose at a certain point in life, but now begin to dissolve because the lesson has been learned. The earthquake appears as an agent of spiritual liberation, breaking repetitive cycles of pain, suffering, and emotional stagnation. It does not come to punish, but to free both parties from patterns that no longer contribute to the evolution of the soul. Spiritually, this dream shows that true love cannot be sustained by fear, attachment, or dependence. When relationships must end or transform, the earthquake appears as a call for emotional courage. It indicates that by allowing certain structures to fall, you make room for healthier, more conscious bonds aligned with your true essence. Even if the process is painful, the dream reveals that emotional and spiritual liberation is the next necessary step for your growth. The warning from the unconscious. In the world of dreams, the earthquake functions as a powerful inner warning. Psychologically, it appears when you ignore emotional signals for too long, pretending everything is fine, while inside, something has already begun to crumble. Small discomforts, daily frustrations, feelings of inadequacy, emotional exhaustion, and inner conflicts accumulate silently until they reach a critical point. When the unconscious realizes these signs are not being consciously heard, it uses the earthquake as a symbolic cry, an intense manifestation to capture your attention immediately. It is as if the mind were saying that it is no longer possible to keep postponing certain issues. Psychologically, this dream indicates emotional denial. You may be avoiding difficult truths, important decisions, or feelings that cause fear and discomfort. The earthquake breaks this barrier of denial, showing that the cost of ignoring these signs will continue to grow. The sense of chaos in the dream reflects a state of emotional overload. The unconscious does not create extreme images without reason. When it chooses the earthquake, it is because the inner situation has reached a limit that demands action, awareness, and immediate change. Spiritually, dreaming of an earthquake as a warning represents an intervention from the higher plane. It is a call to slow down, stop, and observe your life with greater honesty and depth. The dream invites reflection on choices, paths, relationships, and patterns repeated automatically. It appears as a sign that something is misaligned between your external life and your inner essence. Ignoring this warning may mean prolonging unnecessary suffering, repeating cycles of pain, and remaining stuck in situations that no longer contribute to spiritual evolution. This dream also reveals that healing begins with listening to what you feel, what your body expresses, what your intuition has been trying to communicate for a long time. The earthquake breaks inner silence so that you finally pay attention. Spiritually, it indicates that the soul is asking for changes that can no longer be postponed. It is not about fear or punishment, but care and protection. The spiritual plane uses this strong symbol because it knows that without impact, the message would not be understood. Listening to the dream is the first step toward emotional and spiritual healing. It calls for courage to look inward, face what has been avoided, and take responsibility for your own growth. The earthquake, as a warning from the unconscious, reminds you that every transformation begins when you stop running from yourself and start acting with truth, awareness, and inner alignment. Reconstruction after the shock. After every earthquake, inevitably comes reconstruction. In dreams, this process carries a profound meaning of inner reorganization and emotional rebirth. Psychologically, reconstruction represents the phase in which the mind begins to reorganize after chaos. Everything that was shaken, questioned, or destroyed undergoes careful review. New values emerge, old priorities lose importance, and more conscious choices begin to be made. This stage indicates that you are leaving autopilot mode and beginning to build a life more aligned with who you truly are, not with who others expected you to be. Psychologically, reconstruction after the earthquake reveals emotional maturity. After facing losses, ruptures, and unexpected changes, you begin to better understand your own limits, needs, and desires. What once seemed essential may no longer make sense, while previously ignored aspects gain importance. This dream indicates that you are learning to choose more consciously, avoiding the repetition of old patterns that caused suffering. Emotional reorganization does not happen instantly, but the dream shows that the process has already begun and that there is inner willingness to move forward in a healthier way. Spiritually, reconstruction symbolizes rebirth. The ground that once shook now becomes fertile for new possibilities. The earthquake fulfilled its role by knocking down fragile structures, illusions, and paths that were not aligned with your essence. In doing so, space opens for a new, stronger, truer construction. Spiritually, this dream indicates that the soul has gone through a purification process and is now ready to expand with greater awareness, faith, and authenticity. The initial pain of collapse gives way to a sense of learning learning and inner strengthening. This dream also reveals that you are regaining trust in yourself and in life. Psychologically, reconstruction shows that despite the fear and instability faced, you realize you are capable of starting over. Spiritually, it indicates that there is a greater force sustaining this new cycle. The dream conveys the message that nothing was lost in vain. Every fall brought lessons, every shock revealed important truths, and every rupture opened space for growth. Finally, dreaming of reconstruction after an earthquake shows that the final outcome of the process will be positive. Growth, wisdom, and spiritual strengthening emerge as fruits of this intense experience. Even if the path was painful, the dream reveals that you are more conscious, stronger, and better prepared to build a life based on authenticity, emotional balance, and connection with your true essence. Final message of the earthquake dream. Dreaming of an earthquake is one of the most intense, impactful, and revealing dreams that exist because it touches the deepest structures of the mind and soul. This dream does not appear by chance. It emerges at decisive moments in life when inevitable changes are underway and old foundations can no longer sustain the emotional and spiritual reality you are living. The earthquake speaks of necessary ruptures, inner collapses, and the hidden strength within you that often only reveals itself when everything seems to fall apart. It is a dream that confronts, frightens, but also awakens. From a psychological point of view, the earthquake reveals repressed emotions, ignored conflicts, and inner truths postponed out of fear, insecurity, or attachment to the familiar. It appears when the mind can no longer maintain balance under so much accumulated internal pressure. The dream exposes the urgent need for transformation, showing that continuing the same way is no longer a viable option. Psychologically, it marks the moment when the unconscious demands action, awareness, and emotional responsibility. The shock represents the breaking of old patterns that no longer make sense for who you are becoming. Spiritually, dreaming of an earthquake is a powerful call to abandon illusions, false securities, and structures built on fear, dependence, or disconnection from your essence. The spiritual plane uses this symbol to show that true stability does not lie in what is external, but in inner connection. When everything shakes, the soul is invited to remember what is truly essential. The spiritual earthquake does not destroy without purpose. It cleanses, realigns, and prepares the ground for a more conscious, true reconstruction aligned with the soul's purpose. This dream also carries the message that no rupture happens without a greater reason. Nothing shakes without purpose. Every shock reveals a truth that needed to be seen. Every collapse closes a cycle that has fulfilled its role. Dreaming of an earthquake marks the end of a phase based on illusions or resistance to change and the beginning of a new cycle that is far more conscious, authentic, and aligned with who you truly are. Even if the process is uncomfortable, it carries the promise of growth, maturity, and inner strengthening. Finally, this dream invites courage. Courage to look inward, accept change, and allow life to reorganize itself in a truer way. The earthquake, as a final message, reminds you that only when the old ground breaks do you discover the strength that has always existed within you. If this content resonated with you, leave your like now. This helps the channel a lot to keep bringing deep interpretations like this. Subscribe to the channel and activate the notification bell to be notified whenever a new video is published. Here, every dream is a message, and every message has the power to transform your life.